Actually, I do have to. The subcommittee will come to order. Without objection, the chair is recognized to declare recess at any time. We welcome everyone here today for a hearing on the future of AI policy. I will note that this will be perhaps the last in a long series of AI hearings before several pieces of legislation will be marked up. So I encourage members on both sides of the aisle to make sure that this panel of witnesses are asked questions that may be germane to proposed legislation or legislation already offered. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Literally a generation ago, or in technology, 10 generations ago, a sharp young man graduated from Cal State San Marcos in my congressional district. He joined a company that I then was CEO of, Directed Electronics, which had an inherent inventory problem. The inventory problem was that we had a few SKUs that sold well and we managed, and hundreds of SKUs that were constantly either out of or oversupply of. It wasn't anyone's fault. We had simply grown quickly, and there was a certain amount of inconsistency in what was being sold in a given month. So that bright young man took all of that inventory and the records and put it into SuperCalc, a precursor to Microsoft Excel. Within weeks, we had reduced our out of stock, increased our same-day delivery, trimmed inventory to a level that actually saved us over $1 million a year in inventory maintenance cost. That bright young man continued to work at the company for many years. He did not continue to use SuperCalc for long because technology quickly gave better and better tools. The man, the program, the machine, both are necessary to implement and make AI a reality. But it was the man who made the machine that made the man a success. Over the last century, the U.S. has led the way in virtually every area of technology because of our pro-innovation bias. We are the innovators. Well, China are the duplicators, and Europe, yes, are the regulators. As we speak, though, my home state of California, with an economy larger than that of Italy, is rivaling the European Union when it comes to trying to lead on regulation. This wouldn't be such an ironic occurrence, except we are the home of innovation and, yes, the new bastion of regulation. But just as in the 1990s, when America led the internet revolution, a light touch, such as that offered by the president in his initiative, in fact, must be the direction we go. Anything else will give us a problem that I will describe. If we, in fact, are not innovating 10 times faster than we're regulating, if the speed of innovation in the U.S. is not at least months or, if possible, years ahead of China, their speed of duplication, some of it actually using AI to duplicate what we're doing, will in fact cause us to lose our edge. My home state is part of the problem. The European Union is part of the problem. But as you'll see from our witnesses today, all 50 states have implemented some form of AI regulation. And in fact, there are in the neighborhood of 1,000 pieces of legislation spread over 50 states that will create, if allowed to continue, a patchwork of indecision by the AI industry. Given conflicting regulations, given the inability to roll out with certainty technology, that technology simply will not be a priority. Let there be no doubt, though, either we win in innovation and we win in AI, or we lose our edge on the international stage. Vice President Vance said it best, America's AI technology must remain the gold standard worldwide. We must continue to produce the next generation AI, and we cannot do it with a patchwork of conflicting state laws. As of now, we are ahead. Let there be no doubt. We are ahead in hardware. We are ahead in software development. We are also on the leading edge of having the solutions for the energy problems. That includes modular nuclear reactors. It includes a willingness to provide innovative solutions. During the last break, I went to one of Apple's facilities, almost 1,700 acres located near Sparks, Nevada. What I saw there were some of the most impressive, simple buildings filled with endless rows of various levels of chips for both AI and conventional data storage. What I also saw was a system that used zero conventional air conditioning to maintain that cooling. They had managed to beat one of the major causes of unrelated energy consumption, which was air conditioning, through an innovative system of evaporative coolers from locally available water and a filtration system that allowed those to operate 24/7 without in any way being damaged by the high flow of air. They are making advances. This is over and above the innovation that we're seeing in chips and the ones that we plan to, and the additional power. I'm going to contrast just over the border from California, this location in Sparks, Nevada, because it has 64 gigawatts of generation power. Why would they need it? Well, they'd only need it in case of a power failure. Not so. The first time all were operational was to prevent blackout in California, because California lacked the power, and by their going offline, Nevada was able to export power into my home state. That tells you a lot of the innovation in California, but not the ability to have those great new centers located there. In fact, Virginia, just a mile from here, is the #1 location, and other states are competing aggressively for it, and if nothing changes, they will win. These new laws will also affect early stage development, because technical experts, let alone lawmakers, are not capable today of predicting where we will be tomorrow. Earlier this year, in fact, overnight, the thinking on AI development and power needed took a sharp change, and everyone on both sides of the Atlantic and Pacific are learning from what was released, and that will continue. Of course, I don't want to be just a naysayer, because in fact, I am from an innovative state. I am from a state that is second to none in finding the best and the brightest and bringing them here. And although this committee does not have this subcommittee does not have jurisdiction over immigration, I want to make it clear here that AI development will also be about this committee working in a bipartisan basis to find ways to not just attract, but to retain the best and the brightest for that development. Let there be no doubt, there are 300,000 Chinese students studying in America, and most of them are being told to come home and bring with them what they're learning here. The release of the new AI action plan signaled to the world that the Trump administration needs Congress to legislate America First AI. Now, I know that sounds pejorative, but it isn't. The fact is that whether it was catching up on the, if you will, the interstate superhighway under Al Gore Sr., or it was leading on taking the ARPANET and turning it into the internet, we have worked together in the past. We have worked to limit states and to restrain our own overregulation for the benefit of our economy, and it has worked. I want to welcome the President's leadership and look forward to working again to promote it. I want to additionally say that we have partners on both sides of the aisle. This committee, including, she's not here right now, but Zoe Lofgren and others have been great partners in this in the past, and I expect they will be. Again, I just want to leave us with one truism. America has innovated and out-innovated the countries around the world for generations. Europe has become a regulator and an admirer of our technology without embracing the way you get it. And China has become the most efficient stealer of technology. And the term duplication, if it was truly innovation, would be a compliment, but it isn't. With that, I recognize the ranking member for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Issa, and thank you to the witnesses for your testimony today. When I drive from Georgia to Washington, D.C., about once every 6 months or so, and I get a chance to listen to the radio and scan and listen to all my favorite stations and tunes, I've got to pass through 3 states. I go through Virginia, go through South Carolina, go through North Carolina, and then I hit Georgia. And we all have had experience in crossing state lines before. And you'll have different speed limits and different levels of enforcement. You have the experience of figuring out what are the rules. So in other words, because you're going 79 miles an hour at the state line and then flip to another state and boom, all of a sudden the speed limit is 65. So you've got to then do, 74 to stop from getting pulled over and hope that that officers won't stop you. But anyway, when some suggested earlier that we in Congress should preempt all state AI laws, they would not just have done away with states' nascent generative AI consumer protections, they would have preempted common law causes of action against AI companies as well. When the doctrine of caveat emptor, or buyer beware, ruled American jurisprudence, consumers had minimal protection and were expected to thoroughly inspect products themselves. Judicial interpretations began to change in the middle 20th century as products became less straightforward and more complicated. Common law developed to better protect consumers in products liability and negligence cases. Today, most Americans can hardly imagine taking apart a toaster, let alone an AI chat box, to make sure that it works correctly. But caveat emptor is effectively what advocates of a moratorium are suggesting we revert to when we talk about an AI moratorium. When you preempt an entire field of law, you're preempting the common law right along with it. Supreme Court law has repeatedly found, as it did in Regal versus Medtronic, that a federal law's reference to a state's requirements includes its common law duties. And in plain language, that means if Congress preempts state AI laws, we also preempt state common law, unless the legislation explicitly says something else. Common law cases to protect consumers are already being filed against generative AI platforms. 2 days ago, Senator Hawley held a hearing on the harms to children using AI technology, calling witnesses whose children died or were hospitalized after interacting with artificial intelligence chat box. I know some of the parents and families are in the room today. Kristen Bride, Juliana Arnold, Mandy Furness, and Megan Garcia. I'm so sorry for what you all have been through, and I admire your commitment to justice. Common law is crucial to the protection of Americans because it exists no matter whether there are comprehensive state laws on the books or no laws governing new technology on the books. Even when there are no statutes, common law helps us set a floor for a standard of care as a society. When some of my colleagues across the aisle talk about a moratorium, preempting common law is exactly what they're talking about. Carve-outs might be offered for some areas of the law. Others may get a loose regulatory structure. But what many don't realize is that the glue that holds the law together would be wiped out in almost every scenario. By protecting common law, we can protect that floor that ensures every person harmed can seek to have their case heard before a court of law. This basic standard of care can spur innovation by preventing a race to the bottom, and it can offer a level of security as the federal government and states determine what the best next steps are for AI in the United States. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Does the gentleman from California seek to be waived onto the committee? Without objection, the gentleman be waived on, even though he's not a member of the subcommittee. And if others yield time to him, he'll be permitted to ask questions. Without objection, so ordered. It is now my pleasure, notwithstanding the chairman and ranking members arriving, to introduce our distinguished panel of witnesses. Dr. David Bray is a distinguished fellow and chair of the Accelerator at the Alfred Lee Loomis Innovative Council at the Simpson Center. He previously served as IT chief at Bioterrorism Preparation and Response Program at the CDC and in the intelligence community. Dr. Bray is the recipient of a Joint Civil Commendation Award and National Intelligence Exceptional Achievement Medal. Welcome. Mr. Kevin Frasier is the AI Innovation and Law Fellow at the University of Texas Law School. His research focus is on how to design regulatory regimes that increase adoption and use of AI. Mr. Frasier also leads the AI Innovation and Law Program, which prepares students for careers related to artificial intelligence. Thank you for being here. Mr. Adam Thear is the Senior Fellow for Technology and Innovation at the R Street Institute, a free market think tank. His work focuses on cultivating emerging technologies. He previously was Senior Fellow at the Mercatus Center and was president of the Progress and Freedom Foundation. Professor Neil Richards is the Koch Distinguished Professor at Washington University School of Law, where he also co-directs the Cordell Institute for Policy in Medicine and Law. His work focuses on privacy law and information law and freedom of expression. We welcome all of our witnesses here, and as you may have seen on C-SPAN, it is the rule of the committee that all witnesses be sworn in. Would you please rise to take the oath? And raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm on a penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief? So help you God. Please be seated. Let the record reflect that all witnesses answered in the affirmative. As you also have heard many times, your true entire statement, including reasonable, even if expansive, additional information you submit will be placed in the record. So as a result, if you're going to go past 5 minutes, do so by extension and summarize what you do so we can leave time for questions. And with that, we will begin. Right, they've got me, I want to make sure I get the right end, Dr. Bray. After this, it gets easy. We just go across.
Thank you, Chairman Issa. Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. I'm Dr. David Bray, Chair of the Loomis Accelerator at the Stimson Center, Principal at Lead to Adapt Ventures, Senior Advisor at General Catalyst Institute, and a Fellow with the National Academy of Public Administration. I work on tech, data, and geopolitical issues to help startups scale, communities adapt, and legacy organizations transform themselves amidst rapid global changes. My testimony focuses on advancing reliable, trustworthy AI consistent with the values of free societies and free markets from these perspectives. I place my remarks in the context that the United States is experiencing multiple tech revolutions in addition to AI, advances in space technology, biotech, quantum tech, and the miniaturization of sensors and robots, all impacting US companies, our workforce, and our communities. With respect to AI, I would like to mention 3 noteworthy advances to inform our discussion. First, active inference AI models themselves demonstrate faster learning and use less data and less energy. Such approaches can be bounded by spatial or temporal limitations in ways that are human-readable and interpretable across AI systems. Each of us as individuals could, in the future, restrict what AI systems do on our behalf. Second, open-weight AI models with open-source code have shown we can transform currently complicated processes, such as a Veterans Affairs form, into a conversational interface, dramatically reducing the time to complete and speeding access to care. Third, federated learning allows AI systems to learn on data sets where they exist with proper consent, empowering both individuals and organizations to choose if their data sets and intellectual property are usable by an AI, and negotiate a beneficial contractual relationship in return. Given these advances, 3 guiding principles drive my recommendations to the subcommittee. First principle, U.S. strategies for advancing AI should recognize interdependencies between AI and other tech advancements. This requires a light-touch policy framework. Recently, the National Academy of Public Administration has illuminated methods for sufficiently agile policy approaches to achieve measurable goals at the pace necessary given global changes. Second principle, different AI methods carry different risks and benefits. For example, AI approaches to computer vision and expert systems follow predictable outcomes, whereas generative AI produces less predictable results. As such, AI policy should reflect these differences in AI methods. Third principle, there have been multiple waves of AI improvements over the years. We should expect continued advancements, which means U.S. policy approaches must adapt accordingly. For example, the Stimson Center's Loomis Council intentionally brings together industry leaders to adapt projects to new AI developments. Even with different AI methods and the need for continuous adaptation, groups tied to specific domain applications of AI, for example, healthcare, transportation, and finance, can promote data-level interoperability across AI systems, avoiding silos. When electronic health record systems advanced in the 2000s, the United States encouraged the nonprofit Health Level 7 to evolve an open standard framework for interoperable clinical data with privacy controls. We should do something similar now for health and AI. We each deserve a choice as to when an AI uses our data, and medical doctors should not be hindered by non-interoperable AI systems. Given these principles, my recommendations are as follows. First recommendation, our principles and policies should help advance freedom, human agency, and individual liberties. We face global competition from the Chinese Communist Party regarding AI's future, including their AI Plus initiative. U.S. AI strategy must simultaneously encourage the advancements of the entire U.S. AI industry and encourage the industry to advance individual freedoms. Second recommendation, upgrading existing domain-specific laws is more pragmatic than adapting new sweeping AI regulations. I recommend a domain-specific approach because the risk of different AI methods vary by applications. Examples include updating the Privacy Act of 1974, revisiting HIPAA, and reviewing other existing laws where the speed, scale, and scope of AI methods impact different risk calculus. Congress's recent efforts to upgrade banking laws with respect to stablecoins is another example of updating existing statutes given new technologies. Third recommendation, assess what actions consistent with the U.S. values of freedom, human agency, and individual liberties may need light-touch policy to ensure AI advances freedoms across our nation. When updating policies that already exist, we should build on Justice Brandeis's concept of a right to be left alone as law-abiding citizens, including choices about when personal data sets are and are not used by an AI, as well as when AI and any associated intellectual property shared is processed locally as opposed to a cloud-based instance. Any national AI strategy should ensure we do not stifle advancements towards reliable, trustworthy AI consistent with the values of both free societies and free markets. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Frasier.
Chairman Issa, Ranking Member Johnson, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Kevin Frasier. I'm the AI Innovation and Law Fellow at the University of Texas School of Law. Outside of teaching students, I believe there is no greater purpose for academics than sharing knowledge with policymakers. This purpose is all the more paramount when it comes to complex and novel challenges like harnessing AI to unleash human flourishing. A few months ago, Dr. Jensen came before this committee and announced that the nation that leads in AI will shape the future. Nothing has changed in the interim. What remains uncertain, however, is whether the U.S. will retain its leading position. My goal today is to address the proper role of the states and the federal government in shaping AI policy. On governing the use of AI, the 10th Amendment reserves extensive authority to the states to regulate within their borders. On the matter of AI development, the founders offered their answer in abandoning the Articles of Confederation and adopting a strong, centralized government capable of protecting and advancing the national interest. As I'll explain in the rest of my testimony, the founders infused 3 principles into our Constitution that, when applied to the AI discussion, resolve debates about the authority of each actor to shape AI development. Subsequent changes in related areas of the law, namely the Commerce Clause, have given rise to the false impression that muddled judicial interpretation somehow relaxed these principles. However, they remain as foundational today as they were 200 years ago. Adherence to these principles is essential both as a matter of fidelity to the founders' vision, as well as to securing an AI regulatory posture that aligns with our federal system. The first principle is that the federal government alone is responsible for matters that implicate the economic and political stability of our country. The emerging threats to national security and economic stability posed by advances in AI place regulation of training frontier AI models squarely in the authority of the national government. To focus on one of many examples, AI has lowered the barriers to the creation and deployment of bioweapons by bad actors. Defensive measures have not progressed at the same rate. Experts warn that with significant technical progress, the nation would still need to adopt extreme measures to ready ourselves for a near future in which synthetic pathogens go undetected. That effort will flounder with second-rate AI. Training frontier AI models, and by extension, safeguarding our national health and prosperity, cannot be waylaid by state laws, no matter how well-intentioned. Second, the extensive authorities reserved to each state end at their respective borders. As the Supreme Court has specified on multiple occasions, the equal sovereignty of the states is a fundamental principle of our Constitution. Our constitutional order does not condone one state to intentionally and substantially interfere with the liberty and freedom of another. Political clout, economic might, nor population grants one state the authority to project its legislation into another. Whether a state is the 4th largest economy in the world or the 104th largest has no bearing on its authority to shape the lives of Americans beyond its borders. Though the Supreme Court has tolerated the inevitability of some regulatory spillover, its recent holding in National Pork Producers Council v. Ross does not permit the sorts of regulations pending before many state legislatures, regulations that may deny all Americans access to a good itself because of the preferences of one political community. Building new pig pens to satisfy the preferences of Californians is technically and financially feasible. Training 2 AI frontier models, one to comply with the preferences of a single state and one for the rest of us, is a billion-dollar undertaking that rests on uncertain and evolving realities. Contradictory and vague state laws that impact AI development may thwart the sort of technological progress that has long fueled the American dream. Under a patchwork of state laws that impact AI development, we will see that Americans may never experience the improvements in education and healthcare that could have been realized by a national approach to pursuing the AI frontier. The third principle is that the ultimate authority in our constitutional system rests with the people. Our founders aspired for every American to exercise meaningful control over their daily lives. Extraterritorial regulation of AI jeopardizes these and other features of individual agency. The nature of AI development means that if labs are compelled to comply with one state's regulations for model training, those requirements will be imposed on the rest of the country, rendering us all less likely to realize the benefits of AI advances. Americans may be able to move as freely as they'd like, but they would still find themselves using AI tailored by state legislators over which they have no control. Such a world is the antithesis of liberty. Denial or delay of the most sophisticated AI as a result of flawed state legislation is not a matter of mere inconvenience. It's a question of access to the greatest driver of human flourishing we've yet to develop. Thank you again for inviting me here today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Thear.
Chairman Issa, Ranking Member Johnson, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the invitation to participate in this hearing. My name is Adam Thear, and I'm a senior fellow at the R Street Institute, where I cover emerging technology policy. My message here today boils down to one simple point. Congress needs to act promptly to formulate a clear national policy framework for artificial intelligence to ensure our nation is prepared to win the computational revolution. If we get this wrong, the consequences could be profound in terms of geopolitical competitiveness, national security, economic growth, small business innovation, and human flourishing. Unfortunately, America's AI innovators are currently facing the prospect of many state governments importing European-style technocratic regulatory policies across America. As you noted, Mr. Chairman, more than 1,000 AI-related bills are already pending across the nation. But some states are far more aggressive and influential on national market outcomes than others. Almost 50 AI-related laws are currently pending in California, and New York is currently considering almost triple that number. Sacramento and Albany should not be dictating AI policy for the entire nation. That approach is especially problematic for so-called little tech innovators who will struggle with confusing, costly compliance burdens. America would not have become the global leader in digital technology it has if we had had 50 state computer bureaus or even a single California Computer Commission allowing to license every single aspect of interstate computing and treat the internet as a regulated utility. Thankfully, America avoided that fate because of wise bipartisan decisions that this Congress made in the 1990s, which let digital technology be born free as opposed to being born into a regulatory cage. Laws like the Telecommunications Act of 1996 and the Internet Tax Freedom Act of 1998 included important provisions preempting and facilitating a national digital marketplace. The U.S. is now the global leader in almost every segment of computing and digital commerce thanks to this wise policy approach. Now is the time for Congress to work the same magic for AI by creating a national framework to prevent a patchwork of state mandates from undermining AI innovation. Colorado Governor Jared Polis has called upon Congress to preempt state AI laws, such as the one his own state passed last year, and he has even endorsed the idea of a state AI regulatory moratorium like the one Congress considered this summer. Other governors have raised similar concerns. Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont has warned of, quote, every state going out and doing their own thing, a patchwork quilt of regulations, he said. And just last week, New York Governor Kathy Hochul noted how, quote, it's hard when one state has a set of rules, another state does, and another state. I don't think that's a model for inspiring innovation, end quote. Congress could again try to implement a moratorium, or it could formally preempt specific state and local regulatory enactments that impose an undue burden on interstate algorithmic commerce. If Congress chooses the latter option, federal lawmakers should first preempt state regulations of AI frontier models because the costs associated with such regulations would outweigh any local benefits. Such rules would create spillovers and undermine development of the system the nation needs to compete globally. State officials also lack the technical expertise and information about national security matters that could be relevant to AI safety considerations. Second, for issues related to so-called algorithmic bias or AI discrimination, Congress should preempt state efforts to regulate the development of AI systems and applications through cumbersome and confusing mechanisms such as AI audits or algorithmic impact assessments. To the extent any such ex-ante regulations are imposed, it should be done at the federal level, and existing federal civil rights laws and non-discrimination standards should apply. Finally, Congress should also require the National Institute of Standards and Technology and the new Center for AI Standards and Innovation within NIST to oversee a new standing AI working group to coordinate and work to resolve other federal state AI policy matters. NIST and CASI could help devise more workable, consistent standards for AI policy matters not already preempted by federal law. Even where the scoping of federal preemption proves difficult, everyone should agree that AI development will be discouraged if America has dozens of different definitions of key concepts. Inconsistent standards will undermine market certainty and hurt investment, innovation, and competition. Ongoing congressional oversight of this process will be essential, and Congress can simultaneously consider what sort of new light touch rules might be necessary at the federal level to address various AI safety concerns. Meanwhile, state governments still have a role to play and will have plenty of room to act using a diverse policy toolkit of generally applicable laws to address any real-world harms that might come about from AI applications. In closing, the time has come for Congress to exercise its constitutional responsibility to protect the interstate marketplace and the national interest in the development of robust AI capabilities that will ensure the United States remains at the forefront of this technological revolution. Thank you for holding this hearing, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you, and particularly thank you for mentioning our former colleague, Mr. Polis. Professor Richards.
Chairman Issa, Ranking Member Johnson, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for
Could you, either put it closer or turn it on or both?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Fantastic, not a problem at all. We're talking tech here, so let's go. We'll go high tech and turn them on.
We have the automatic ones in St. Louis, so.
Of course you do.
Chairman Issa, Ranking Member Johnson, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you this morning. My name is Neil Richards, and I am the Koch Distinguished Professor in Law at Washington University in St. Louis, where I direct the Cordell Institute. This hearing is about whether Congress should consider preempting state laws that touch on artificial intelligence technologies. And it is my firm and considered opinion that denying states the ability to regulate novel technology issues going forward would be a grievous and avoidable error that would not be in the best interests of American industry or the American people. I'd like to offer 3 high-level points this morning. First, federal preemption of state laws touching AI would be reckless and expose consumers to great risk of harm. Artificial intelligence, as we've already heard this morning, is not just one technology. It is a cluster of related and changing technologies that would be nearly impossible for a general preemption law to define with care. In addition, AI technologies will likely affect every aspect of human life, just as industrialization did, starting in the 19th century, and as the internet did, starting in the 20th. Like those before them, AI technologies will produce many good things, but also many bad ones, like kids becoming emotionally dependent upon chatbots, generative AI hallucinations affecting our courts by making up false citations, new ways to hack systems, and other harms, critically, that we cannot foresee today. At a time when we cannot be sure what harms will result, at a time when we can be sure that harms will result, but we cannot be sure how, depriving states of the ability to adapt to and try to mitigate these harms would be to disregard a clear and obvious risk, and that is the legal definition of recklessness. Second, states have been pioneers of sensible tech regulation over the past 3 decades that has built essential digital trust for tech companies. If states had been banned from regulating the internet in 2000, we would have no broad requirement for website privacy policies, no data breach notification laws, no laws banning employees from demanding the social media passwords of their employees, no laws regulating facial recognition technology, no substantive data security statutes, no comprehensive privacy statutes, no laws preventing kids from accessing hardcore digital pornography or other dangerous content, no laws limiting the ability of tech companies to peddle addictive business models to children, and much less enforcement of digital fraud, abuse, crime, hacking, and data breaches. Guided by these state legal guardrails in place to secure essential consumer trust, the past 30 years have seen the explosive success of Silicon Valley. Without state privacy and security laws, for example, we would still be afraid to give our credit card numbers to Amazon. State digital laws have tamed the worst excesses of the internet and helps to make it a trustworthy place for innovation, connection, free expression, and business. And broad AI preemption would have the opposite effect for artificial intelligence. Third, I would like to address the claim frequently made by industry that state regulations somehow stifle innovation. As history makes clear, these arguments are, in my opinion, mistaken and misguided. Law creates and enables innovation by stabilizing the marketplace. It sets the ground rules for fair and robust competition, making the market safe and sustainable for consumers. Contrary to its libertarian origin myth, Silicon Valley was shaped by laws from the beginning, from government defense contracts to intellectual property laws, and from securities laws to federal and state prohibitions on unfair and deceptive trade practices. Law has always played a role in preventing scammers and thieves, and in shaping corporate business practices so that they benefit society as a whole. It is the presence of regulation, including state regulation, that has led to America being a leader in digital technologies and services. While we can certainly, and I'm sure we will this morning, debate how much regulation and what kind is appropriate, having no new regulations at a time of rapid change would be a disaster. And if innovation is as magical as industry says it is, it can still do good things while respecting the policy choice of the people's elected representatives. In this way, the necessity required by reasonable regulation has been and should continue to be the mother of invention. In conclusion, stripping our states of any power to regulate AI, potentially anything done with a computer, would be a reckless and grievous error. State regulations have always played an essential role in building consumer trust and shaping the digital revolution for the better. Thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you. I understand the ranking member would like to make an opening statement.
If that's all right with you, Mr. Chairman.
It is always good to hear from you.
Well, thank you kindly.
Gentleman's recognized.
I'm very grateful to you for putting together this really important hearing, and thanks to the witnesses for your statements. When commercially available AI debuted 3 years ago, the consequences were breathtaking from the start. Generative AI spurred scientific research and provided astonishing new tools to creators. The massive jumpstart to American innovation swept from social and economic domain to social and economic domain, from pharmaceutical research and quantum computing to sound recording and film editing. But generative AI has also raised profound legal, practical, even philosophical problems, such as whether individuals have a right to their name, their image, their likeness, and their voice when they're used in other people's deep fakes. If government has unlimited power to engage in AI-enabled surveillance of our citizens, and what are the appropriate standards of care, if any, for AI platforms to protect users against harmful consequences? Well, Congress takes the time to absorb the shock of these changes and these problems and examines the technology. The states have already begun to enact the first regulations on AI. We often talk about creation of rules for the road when crafting legislation to govern new technology, but I think this way of talking about consumer safety and technological ethics suggests that a road without speed limits would get us to where we're going faster. For generative AI, it's not about creating speed and safety laws and building highway guardrails, but rather building a road system in the first place. Some of my colleagues would argue that the construction of local roads is unnecessary. They say that without broad preemption, without clearing the field of all state-based legal encumbrances, AI companies and fledgling startups will have trouble complying with state laws and will be put to a disadvantage and then wither on the vine. I've heard little to suggest that broad preemption is in fact the appropriate solution to this problem. Proponents of preemption present Americans with a series of false choices, telling us we must choose a side between AI innovation or state powers and federalism, between business and consumers or national security and safe innovation. In 1816, Jefferson wrote, "Laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the progress of the human mind. As that becomes more developed, more enlightened, as new discoveries are made, new truths discovered, and manners and opinions change, with the change of circumstances, institutions must advance also to keep pace with the times." What we're seeing across America is individual states looking at these amazing technological developments and asking whether and how their laws need to change to protect their citizens and advance the common good. Today, you might think that the issue has some kind of necessary partisan valence to it, Republicans on one side, Democrats on the other, but opposition to an AI moratorium, I think, is broad and bipartisan. In fact, when some of my Republican colleagues tried to pass a moratorium through our last spending bill, attorneys general from across the states, red, white, and blue, sent a letter to Congress saying, please don't do this to our state laws. In another letter, 17 Republican governors wrote to Majority Leader Thune and Speaker Johnson praising their, quote, big, beautiful bill, but explaining that the moratorium provision, stripping the right of any state to regulate this technology in any way without a thoughtful public debate, was, quote, the antithesis of what our founders envisioned. I surely disagree with these governors on many things, but I think that they are right and should indeed be free to create what they call, quote, smart regulations of the AI industry that simultaneously protect consumers while also encouraging this ever-developing and critical sector. In a statement submitted for this hearing, AI startup Bray wrote that a moratorium on state laws would create a giant vacuum and strip away the rules needed to, quote, raise capital, foreign partnerships, and build safely in order to win consumer trust. Without a road on which to travel forward, startups are cut out of the market in favor of large companies with the legal and fundraising teams necessary to deal with a barren legal landscape. Finally, some argue we need unrestrained AI development to properly compete with China. The subcommittee has held many bipartisan hearings on the threat to innovation, AI supremacy, and IP from China. It would be amazing, I think, even dangerous to posit that we need to become more like China to compete with China. In fact, it seems more plausible to me that to believe that stronger, better products developed in America while protecting Americans and their data through American political processes and the passage of American laws will ensure that AI is both more advanced, more durable, and more internationally competitive. Protecting American innovation, investing in American research, developing American laws to deal with problems like deep fakes, political deep fakes, discrimination through AI and so on, and investing in our workforce, I believe, is the right way to win the so-called AI arms race. American safety is not at odds with AI innovation. That should be the baseline for any conversation we have about the best way moving forward. And I very much look forward to this conversation and have already learned a lot from it. Yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman. All other opening statements, without objection, all of their opening statements be placed in the record. It is now my pleasure to go to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Klein, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the ranking member for referencing our third president, gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Jefferson, and one of our great inventors from our earliest days of our republic, and for the chairman referencing the work of our current governor, Governor Youngkin, who is working to make sure that Virginia is the leader in data center development. We continue to be the leader nationally, and we intend to stay that way as AI grows and develops. Mr. Frasier, you've written that the Constitution's intellectual property clause is first and foremost a directive to advance and spread knowledge. I think that was on X a couple weeks ago. How should Congress strike the right balance between protecting copyright owners and ensuring that AI regulation continues to promote the spread of knowledge consistent with that constitutional purpose?
Thank you very much for the question, Congressman, and thanks for the follow, or at least perhaps the like. I think in this regard, the Constitution is clear that the IP clause has always been grounded in progressing the promotion of science and useful arts. And here, if you go back to the founding articles, as well as subsequent interpretation by the Supreme Court, the focus has always been on making sure that there's the spread of knowledge across the country. IP laws grant an exclusive right to creators to attempt to incentivize that creation. What we need is to make sure that there is an economic analysis of the extent to which those laws are working as intended. The purpose of the IP clause is not the profit of creators, it is the progress of society. And so what we need to get back to are those first principles when it comes to examining copyright law and patent law. Right now, if you look at analysis from scholars such as Richard Watt, you will see that the preponderance of copyright benefits are not going to your average Joe and Jane author, but to large publishers. And so we need more analysis on that front.
Would you agree that ensuring transparency in AI systems, such as being able to trace what data was used to train a model, is essential both for protecting IP rights and for maintaining public trust in AI platforms?
I would agree that broad overviews of the sources of training data are important to get an understanding of where and how models are being trained.
And in that same spirit, could giving creators a private right of action for tampering with content credentials help strike the right balance between protection and innovation?
My own estimation is that granting that sort of right would be a significant barrier to AI innovation, given the centrality of access to data for innovation. We've seen that many courts and many scholars have regarded the use of data as a transformative purpose under copyright law, and denying the ability to train on wide swaths of data would be a real hindrance to our ability to leverage AI. As many folks have said on many occasions, bad data leads to bad AI. If you want better AI, you want better quality information. And if we throw many legal gears into that equation, we won't get the AI we deserve.
Thank you. Dr. Bray, as we consider whether and how best to regulate AI platforms, do you believe that we must avoid the same mistakes we made in the early days of the internet with broad safe harbors that gave platforms a free pass for enabling copyright infringement and countless other harms?
Thank you for that question, Representative Klein, and as a fellow Virginian, glad to be here. So I was around, actually working in the 90s on the early days of the World Wide Web, and my observations would be, we did fit for purpose for the 90s. Now, in the 2 decades since, we have seen the rise of applications on top of that technology where we may need to make adjustments. And I think what we need to separate is the desire to roll out the technology so that the entire nation could have access to the internet. And at the same time, if we see that the applications need adjustments for the law, that would make more sense to adjust. However, I would say what we need to recognize as well as we go forward here, where are we trying to advance the technology so it can be used by startups, it can be used by communities, it can be used by legacy organizations that haven't gone AI native yet. And at the same time, if we see there are applications where we want to prevent harm to individuals, to children, or things like that, adjust the applications while not limiting innovation on the technology.
Just like other businesses, bad actors have to be accountable for the harms they cause. In addition, if we consider some type of temporary pause for state-level AI-specific regulation, we have to ensure that other generally applicable state and federal laws continue to apply, with copyright law being one example. Do you think AI platforms should be held to the same standard of accountability as any other business, including when it comes to respecting copyright?
Absolutely, and I would actually say that's why I'm so excited about federated learning, because there actually could be the opportunity where, whether you're a recording artist, you're a musician, you're an individual, you could actually say, here's the data that I have pooled. You can learn on my data in situ as opposed to shipping it somewhere, and we can have that actually recorded as a transaction. And then in return, I'm getting benefit, whether it be financial or otherwise. It's a new model that's actually quite possible. It's been possible for more than 5 or 6 years, and we can motivate people to do it.
Great, thank you, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Who seeks recognition? The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Professor Richards, I mentioned in my opening statement my concern that broad federal preemption of state AI laws would also preempt common law causes of action. How does common law, particularly tort law, help protect Americans from harm?
Well, thank you for the question, Representative Johnson. Common law is the foundation of American law. It is older than the United States. It goes back to the colonies, to the English tradition. Common law has a flexibility to the law. If we think about my own specialty, privacy law, there was a reference earlier by one of the other witnesses to Justice Brandeis's right to be let alone. Privacy law in America, it was originally a product of common law, where the law adjusted to realize that data about people, information was being collected without their willingness, it was being disclosed. And in an important line of cases relevant to this subject today, to protect the names or likenesses of people whose pictures and names were being used to sell products without their consent. So common law is a tremendous source of flexibility and vitality in our law that allows the law to adjust to change circumstances like the advent of technological revolutions such as artificial intelligence.
Thank you. Can common law be used to protect Americans even in the absence of explicit statutes?
Absolutely, sir. I mean, that is sort of the nature of the common law, that the judges can apply the existing rooted principles of tort law and contract law and property law, and they can, from those general principles, divine specific applications that can provide new protections so that the law continues, as it always has, to evolve alongside technological invention, as the ranking member referred to Mr. Jefferson's statement from 1816, which, as a proud graduate of UVA, I also endorse.
Some of the current lawsuits against AI companies are being brought under common law to hold companies accountable for the harm that their products have caused to children. For example, Megan Garcia is suing Character Technologies and Google after her 14-year-old son, Sewell Setzer, died by suicide. She testified before our colleagues in the Senate this week that his death was, quote, the result of prolonged abuse by AI chatbots, was the result of prolonged abuse by AI chatbots on a platform called Character AI, end quote. The chatbot sent Sewell sexual messages and asked him to come home to me as soon as possible. Others have filed lawsuits against Character Technologies and OpenAI for wrongful death, negligence, and other causes under both common law and state laws about deceptive or unfair trade practices. These tragic cases show some of the worst possible harms that can arise from AI technologies. Professor Richards, does an AI moratorium run the risk of impeding these lawsuits that seek to hold companies accountable?
It would, I particularly if it were defined broadly. And let me also say in response to your question, Representative Johnson, as a parent myself, my heart goes out to the families who've lost their children. I think when we think about laws like negligence or rules like negligence, negligence was the great innovation of the common law to respond to industrialization. It means that anybody acting against other people must behave in a reasonable way and not cause unreasonable harm. I am sure that the car companies and the railway companies and the industrial companies of the 19th and 20th centuries would have argued that the common law developing the law of negligence would have impeded innovation, but actually it safeguarded the development of those technologies by enabling us to be able to drive cars and ride on the rails and fly in airplanes and otherwise enjoy the benefits of our inventions, knowing that we are safe and we are protected. And where those technologies or their deployers overstep the line, we have a right of action to defend our rights and protect our families.
Thank you. And it was states that developed the common law. Professor Richards, beyond common law, are there some areas where it's appropriate for states to lead the way on laws about AI technologies? And if so, what sectors or use cases should continue to be the providence of the states?
I think the answer to that question is yes, and I think particularly where there is deployment of AI rather than generation of AI, the use of AI in point-of-sale devices, employment discrimination, consumer protection, the traditional provinces of state regulation. And let me also, if I could add one additional thing, Representative.
Briefly.
States have filled the gap that this Congress, which did not regulate the internet, did not regulate privacy generally, have done so. And I think with AI technologies, if Congress is for whatever reason not able to pass comprehensive legislation protecting Americans, states will continue to fill that gap as they have in the internet age.
Thank you. We now go to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gooden, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Frasier, as a trend, it seems like every state's jumping to regulate AI, and perhaps some of them are doing it just to show early participation. Do you think that's well thought out? And also, what are the long-term effects of having a decentralized patchwork of laws? How does this help or hinder new entrants?
Thank you very much for the question, Representative. Always good to talk to a fellow Texan. Hook 'em. So I think in any prior study we've seen of the impact of a rush to regulate among states, there is a real noticeable impact on small businesses. If we look to research, for example, from INGEN, done in conjunction with the Michigan Ford Public Policy School, we see that just changing a privacy policy statement may be $6,000 in funds to outside counsel. That's $6,000 out of $55,000 of monthly revenue and operational expenses. So from a small business perspective, the rush to regulate is a real hindrance on innovation. I also think that the rush to regulate among the states creates a patchwork and a huge risk of extraterritoriality in terms of application. We've talked a lot about Virginia today, which is welcome. At the time of the founding, Virginia had around 700,000 residents. Delaware and Rhode Island, something around 30,000. The founders didn't say there was a Virginia privilege or we should have a Virginia effect. They did not want to see that happen. Instead, they made sure that states stayed in their respective borders when it came to regulation.
Thank you. And is it possible, do you think, for bad actors to misuse inconsistencies, especially in terms of violating intellectual property rights?
I think that we've seen a documented effect of what's referred to as regulatory overload, as folks at the Mercatus Center have written about. When we have endless litigation, endless labels, endless warnings. Actually, what we get is less safety because people don't know what law to adhere to. If you talk to a lot of startups today, they don't have a public policy person. They don't have a general counsel. So just adding more laws to the equation actually reduces the odds of user safety.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I yield the balance of my time to Mr. Correa from California.
Thank you, Mr. Gooden. Gentlemen, listening to your debate today reminds me of what General Patton used to say, which is lead, follow, or get out of the way. AI is moving faster than we imagined or we even expected just last year, touching every aspect of our lives. Most of our constituents, like many of us here, don't know a lot about it, but they know enough to expect that we here will protect them, their jobs, their children, their intellectual property. And so the debate about whether it's local control or federal control, I think is second to the fact that we just can't move on this stuff at the federal level. And so, Mr. Frasier, you're from Texas, I'm from California, fourth largest economy in the world. But how do you coordinate federal and state action to make sure that we respond to our constituents responsibly? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and I was a Berkeley Law grad, so I share some California ties. I want to emphasize that we do need to see regulation in this space, and we need to see that Americans are protected, and especially our vulnerable communities and children. What I'm concerned about are laws like AB 1046 out of California, for example, that imposes on AI companions a desire to prioritize factual accuracy over a user's preferences.
1047 or 1046?
AB 1046.
Okay.
Prioritizing factual accuracies over the preferences of the user, in this case, a child. To which I ask, who gets to define factual accuracy? Is it California state government? Who's going to answer the question of, is Santa real for a 7-year-old? Who's going to make factual determinations about religion for that child user? Those questions shouldn't be answered by California for the rest of the country.
I would ask you to also look at SB 53 that's now being addressed in the California State Legislature and see what you opine on that as well.
I think SB 53 is the least bad option I've seen with respect to AI development regulation. As we've discussed in this hearing, AI development, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many, should be left to the national government as a core.
Anything you agree with on SB 53?
I very much agree with the whistleblower protections. I think that's an important mark. I also agree with the fact that it calls on regulators to revisit definitions and terms frequently to make sure they're working as intended.
Thank you, Mr. Gooden. And Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Thank you. We now go to the ranking member of the full committee, the gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I don't understand the attack on the patchwork of laws. I mean, first, maybe that's because I'm a quilt person and I like patchworks, but isn't that what federalism is? Federalism is a patchwork, and that's the glory of the American governmental system. To be sure, the Congress gets it together to adopt a national law eventually on everything from the Clean Air Act to the Clean Water Act to the National Labor Relations Act, the Fair Labor Standards Act. But I think it would have made no sense to say before those federal laws were passed, let's wipe out the state laws that exist on child labor or minimum wage or not polluting the water or not polluting the air. In fact, that contradicts what I thought the central dynamic of federalism was, which is the states are the laboratories of democracy, as I think that was Brandeis, and then the different changes that they make are compared to each other, and then they bubble up, and Congress takes all of it into account when it decides to attempt a nationwide approach. Is that a fair statement of the situation, Professor Richards?
Absolutely. I think I also have a degree in early American history from the University of Virginia. My studies in early federal history.
Virginia's getting a lot of play today. I don't know. As a Marylander, I got some questions about that. Yeah.
Would you like me to continue?
Please.
Absolutely. The goal of federalism is to have laws that are more responsive to the people who are closer to those representatives, that the legislatures of particular states can adapt to that particular state's problems and strengths, and also to protect, to experiment.
Okay, so just to restate the obvious, there was an attempt to impose a moratorium on state laws or to wipe out state laws. How is that different from the way that federal preemption has taken place in the other cases that came to mind for me?
Well, sometimes federal preemption can, just through the supremacy clause, preempt particular laws or laws that are inconsistent with a federal mandate. In addition, Congress is allowed to operate in ways to set a general national standard, but still allow states to experiment with stronger standards so that the innovation in regulation can continue apace with the innovation in technology, as you and Mr. Jefferson put it so well.
Well, and in addition to those differences, isn't it the case that a moratorium today would just wipe out state laws without substituting anything, without imposing a national law? I mean,
absolutely.
Is there any precedent for just doing that, saying we don't want any state laws at all while we think it over or while we're stuck in some kind of legislative paralysis?
I can't think of one, and that's why I think it would be disastrous, because depending first on how the law is defined, it could sweep very, very broadly and take out laws that are important and protective, that everybody on this panel would agree are good laws. And second, if you have broad preemption, this would be a defense that tech companies could make in every piece of litigation, increasing the cost in the litigation system as the contours of that preemption definition could continue to affect litigation years into the future.
Yeah. Some people are with us today who are involved in or have been involved in different kinds of litigation, and my heart goes out to them, being a father who's lost a son. And these are all people who've lost children in different kinds of interactions with chatbots and other kinds of AI technology. And I just want to recognize Kristen Bride from Oregon, who lost her son Carson. He was 16 in 2020. It was the same year we lost our son Tommy. Juliana Arnold, who lost her 17-year-old daughter Coco to fentanyl poisoning after she purchased a counterfeit pill online. Megan Garcia from Florida, who lost her 14-year-old son Sewell, who took his life in February after months of abusive interactions with a character AI chatbot. And Jane Doe from Texas, whose son JF suffered severe physical and mental health harm after multiple chatbots instructed and encouraged him to engage in self-harm and self-violence. And so all of which is to say, in my mind, there are profound problems here that we really do need to deal with. And the last thing I would want to do is to try to nullify states that have already addressed the problem in response to constituents dealing with a nightmare like that without replacing it with something. And I'm not averse to the idea that there might be a national law that works, but certainly imposing a legislative vacuum on the country would be a really dangerous way to go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back to you.
You're most welcome. And with that, we go to the gentlelady from Florida for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Frasier, I'd like to return to you. I appreciate so much your discussion of the Commerce Clause, and I think you made some important distinctions for us already in your testimony when you talked about the need for the federal government to intervene and think about preemption when we're talking about a subject that affects the economic or political stability of the United States. And you drew a distinction between pigsties and artificial intelligence. Would you elaborate for us, please, about why you believe the things that we're discussing here today do go to the heart of the economic and political stability of the United States and should be distinct from those areas where the laboratories of democracy concept actually works?
Thank you for the question, Representative Lee. I think it's profoundly important to get back to that Brandeis quote about laboratories of democracy. There's a forgotten portion of that quote, which is without risk to the nation. You can run an experiment without risk to the nation. Many of these experiments that we're seeing proposed and enacted in California do pose a risk to the nation because they try to impede AI innovation itself. When we see individual states reach into the AI development process, they're not just tinkering with a modular process. There's not a AI-specific training run for California that OpenAI does. Anthropic doesn't train its models 50 times over for each state. So while there may be a lane for state regulation, and I believe there's a lane for state regulation with respect to AI use, we have to follow up and ask the question of what does a real experiment look like? And that experiment can't be one that exceeds the borders of that state. And yet California's bills time and time again would result in labs having to change their practices the nation over. And I've lived in California, I've lived in Florida, I've lived in Texas, I've lived in Oregon, I've lived in Massachusetts and in DC. And I can tell you in each of those places, they don't want Californians dictating the terms of their AI.
And I also need to follow up on this question. You said something interesting when you were talking about current copyright law, how it operates in really ensuring that we are still honoring the concepts of content creators and intellectual property. You suggested an economic analysis of what's happening with the use of this content and training models. Would you elaborate for us a bit more on how that would look and how we can get to the bottom of how to properly compensate those content creators?
Happily, thank you for the question. If you look at current settlements, for example, in the Bartz v. Anthropic decision, and you begin to analyze who may those funds actually go toward, a large number of that fee is going to go to publishers. It's not going to go to the actual authors themselves. So if we are trying to incentivize the creation of new art and new discoveries and new scientific discoveries, copyright may not be the vehicle we need. It's not serving the same purpose it did in 1789, back when it was just limited to 14 years with the possibility of a 14-year renewal. It is now 70 years plus the life of the author. That is an incredibly long time, especially when you consider that the founders really hated monopolies. So the fact that we've ended up in a world in which a handful of publishers may be able to dictate the quality of our AI, I think is antithetical to the original purpose of the IP clause.
Thank you. And Mr. Thear, one of the things that you touched on was the idea that Congress could explore giving NIST or CASI more authority to develop standards for AI frontier models. Would you share more on your perspective of how we might do that? Should we designate a single federal entity to try to develop those standards? Share with us a little more on your thoughts there, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. Let's be clear that the reason that NIST needs to play a role here in this new CASI body is because they have the ability to address exactly what the problem is here, which is that many states are attempting to impose a very technocratic type of design on artificial intelligence models and systems preemptively in an almost European-style way. And that's a huge problem. I'll just again quote from Governor Jared Polis, who said, "Government regulation that is applied at the state level in a patchwork across the country can have the effect to tamper innovation and deter competition in an open market." But it's not just that. These states lack the technical capability to do some of this in certain circumstances, and they lack the information needed to do it properly. We have set up this body, I should remind the committee, set up under President Biden and retained by President Trump in a bipartisan move, and just renamed to focus more on standards and innovation. That's a good plan. Once again, we have a bipartisan agreement here. We've got a new technical body, and it can handle it in conjunction with other existing policies, both federal and state.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. We now go to the gentlelady from California, Ms. Lofgren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before I make remarks or questions, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to put into the record a letter from the California Privacy Protection Agency.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. You know, the title of this hearing, Californication, I take a little bit of exception to. You know, I get it. People bring up California because we set the pace. But it's worth noting that I think my colleague from California, Mr. Correa, mentioned California is the fourth largest economy in the world, with over 4.1 trillion past Japan last year, and trailed only Germany, China, and the United States as a whole. It's number one. California's the number one state for manufacturing. It's home to the most Fortune 500 companies of any state. More than 40 are in Silicon Valley, my home. It also has the highest agricultural output of any state. It's home to the nation's, 5 of the nation's top 10 public universities, UCLA, UC Berkeley, UC San Diego, UC Davis, and UC Irvine. It accounts for over 12% of all university R&D expenditures in the United States, with the University of California system alone spending more than $12.1 billion, and it receives more NIH funding than any other university system in the United States. Now, these aren't just vanity stats, they're the foundation of the modern innovation economy that California has built. World-class universities, labs, investors, entrepreneurs, workers who turn ideas into jobs, into growth. California has been and remains the leader in technology, and the engine that built our economy now powers our AI leadership. California leads the world with 32 of the top 50 AI companies based here. So I do think, although it's always fun to criticize the most successful state, we must be doing something right to have achieved all of this. Now, this is a hearing on AI, and some of the comments made by the witnesses I agree with. Mr. Bray, you mentioned that upgrading existing domain-specific laws is more pragmatic than attempting sweeping new regulations. I very much agree with that. But I think that's also going to need room for regulations that are specific or laws that are specific to each state. I mean, there are things that are the proper purview of states, and there are things that are the proper purview of the federal government, and certainly I was a critic of Mr. Wiener's bill from the last session in that it overreached in the national security effort. I also agree, Mr. Thear, that the EU approach is incorrect. I mean, to try and micromanage the workings of the AI system is doomed to failure, it seems to me. However, the recommendations that we simply preempt when we have nothing put together now is problematic. And I've just got to say, Mr. Chairman, and you are also a member of the Science Committee along with me, we had a pretty effective bipartisan task force on AI in the last Congress, chaired by Mr. Obernolte from California, as well as Ted Lieu from California. And they took the first step. I mean, they didn't finish the job, but they haven't even been reconstituted in this Congress. We do heavily rely on NIST, an agency that is widely respected in the Congress and in the technology world, but we've got to look at what's happened to NIST. They've been eviscerated by the Doge people, and I fail to see how they're going to be able to perform the tasks that we're hoping that they can perform, given what has happened to them. So I would just like to say that we ought to be working on a bipartisan basis again. The Science Committee staffed the task force. I would urge the Speaker and whatever influence the Chairman can have to reestablish that AI task force as a super subcommittee of the Science Committee so that we can get more work done and get to where we need to be to have the guardrails and the standards that are appropriate at a national level, while also recognizing there are things that are of value in the state level. As the note from OpenIA just mentioned, Buffy Wick's online age verification is something they support. So there are things that the states can do, there's things that the federal government can do, but we're not going to do anything unless we can get our act together and reinstitute that task force and get some more work done. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady, and I might note that both sides of the title reflect California as the home of the innovation that's driving it. I might also take an opportunity to completely agree with your comments related to the need for us to act, that a preempting without a solution, without some of the work that is being currently worked on both here in the House and Senate would not be well received. So I think we have the groundwork for a lot of the kinds of work that you and I have done together. And I look forward to very much this hearing being the beginning of us launching bipartisan legislation, because we do need to act in some cases, and you have always been a good partner in that acting. And with that, we continue on, with deference to my great state, the Commonwealth of Virginia. We'll continue with the California effort and go to Mr. Kiley for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I wholeheartedly agree with my colleague from California that our state continues to be the center of breathtaking innovation worldwide. However, the competency of our state government is another matter entirely, not to impugn the competence of any of my former colleagues in the Sacramento legislature, but this is a body that struggles with things like building roads, delivering electricity, managing forests, building dams, and getting water to come out of hoses. So the notion that this is the right body to regulate the most powerful technology in human history, whose workings are actually largely beyond the understanding even of the technology's creators, is a fairly fantastical notion. Not only that, but we are also faced with a technology that continues to accelerate in capability in an exponential way, in a way that is unlike anything we've seen before. Just to take one very specific example, you have leading models have recently gotten the gold medal on the International Math Olympiad, something that most experts thought was still going to be years away. And so I do think the risk that California is going to drive AI policy for the entire country is a very real one. And I think that a national framework that seeks to stop that from happening is needed and appropriate. And more specifically, I see the federal role as including the following. I mean, number one, of course, we need to be prepared to combat concrete harms as they arise, and harms where the use of AI tools can sort of accentuate the risk. Secondly, there needs to be, risk assessment type tools. Maybe, and as much as I'm giving California a hard time, there are some decent ideas in this latest bill. Incident reporting, transparency as far as safety protocols. Of course, there's a tremendous role for the federal government when it comes to the infrastructure needs behind the ever-escalating investment in data centers. Beyond that, I think it's very important that policymakers continue to be apprised as to the capabilities of these models. In fact, both sides of it, the risks as well as the capabilities. There are, of course, channels that exist both between the labs and government and among the labs themselves. But I think that most of us as policymakers, unless you're out looking for it, are not kept up to speed on exactly where the leading edge is. I think that's all very important. I think there could also be a lot more investment in actually safety and alignment related research. The labs do this themselves, but they're not necessarily incentivized to do it. And so there could be more of a federal role for promoting basic cutting edge safety related and alignment related research. But then finally, and maybe most importantly, I think that part of this conversation that we've been focusing a lot on when it comes to discussions of AI. There have been more of them happening here lately, but they've been really oriented on the aspects of the issue that are familiar. Okay, so the issues related to energy, issues related to water, some of the risks that are of a familiar kind. But the discussion has not focused much on the broader question of how are we going to prepare society for the enormous changes that are likely to be ushered in the coming years. And so when we get to this idea of states as laboratories of democracy or of experimentation, I think this actually is maybe the context in which that idea is most relevant. Because when it comes to sort of regulating the capabilities and constraining the capabilities of the systems themselves, the laboratories of democracy idea isn't really fitting. Number one, because there is an enumerated federal power when it comes to interstate commerce. Number two, you talk about experimentation. This is sort of something that we have to get right and we only get one shot at. there's a widely shared view that once AI capability crosses a certain threshold, whether that be recursive self-improvement or some other threshold, there's sort of going to be an escape velocity. So that has implications, number one, for the sort of narrower geopolitical context of which country leads in the technology, but also for the broader idea of, is this technology going to be aligned with and beneficial to humanity? But I do think that states can play a role when it comes to preparing society for using this technology for good in various domains. So for example, education. I think that you're seeing states already experimenting with ways that AI can be used to close achievement gaps and to bring tools to students unlike anything we've ever had before. Transportation. States can take a lead, and some states have taken a lead in preparing our transportation systems for the increasing capacity for autonomy within various modalities. And then finally, and not finally, there are various other examples, but another final example I'll mention is the use of AI itself in government in order to improve government processes, which we're seeing some of here at the federal level. We're seeing some experimentation with states and other countries across the world. But when it comes to being laboratories of democracy and the role of states here, I think that's probably where states can be most valuable, and our role in Congress should be to pursue some sort of federal framework. I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. We now go to the patient gentlelady from North Carolina for her 5 minutes. Ms. Ross.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have a unanimous consent request. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter by Frank Cullen, Executive Director of the Council of Innovation Promotion, to you and the ranking member, dated September 18th, 2025, which expresses the Council's concern regarding recent proposals for Congress to impose a moratorium on state-level regulation of AI.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you again to both the chair and the ranking member for organizing this very important hearing, and to the witnesses for your testimony. I'm glad that we're talking about how Congress and other lawmakers can responsibly legislate and regulate around AI. I represent the Research Triangle in North Carolina. I have seen the incredible things that AI can do, particularly in the medical area and in biopharma, and I'm just blown away by the powerful and positive use of AI. But I've also seen the negative effects of AI, and I'm thrilled that one of those issues has been brought up by Representative Klein and Representative Lee, and that's the ongoing necessary litigation that's happening with content creators and copyright. I was with the head of Anthropic this morning talking about how much money they're having to pay for what they did that was illegal, flat out illegal. And I hope and look forward to working with Mr. Chairman and the ranking member to make a hearing on that issue, and we've had a couple of those hearings happen again, but do it in a way that we can promote good behavior by AI companies. I also, I know I love California, and I know we're talking about California, but I want to bring up some crucial areas where other states have regulated AI in necessary ways. And I know that we have the parents of children who have been hurt by AI here. And the states are ahead of Congress in protecting our children. And given our inaction, many states have stepped up, passing legislation covering topics that run the gamut from expanding CSAM laws to cover AI-generated material in Alabama, to prohibiting AI from being used to provide mental health care services in Nevada. And then, you know, we've been talking about democracy, prohibiting the use of AI during an election to create political messaging that contains deep fakes of candidates for office in New Hampshire. And so this, you know, we've been talking about federalism, but sometimes the states have to act. I also have some concerns. I fully agree with the chairman and a lot of the sentiment here that Congress does need to come together in a bipartisan way. But I think some of the AI companies want this preemption because they know that they can muck up the congressional situation, which isn't that hard to do, and create the inaction so they can do whatever they want to do for as long as they possibly can do it. So with that long introduction, Professor Richards, the federal government often regulates in particular areas that affect interstate commerce, like air travel. The states have areas where they traditionally take the lead, like insurance. When it comes to the states making laws that affect AI deployment, what sectors or use cases should continue to be within the state's purview, where the federal government shouldn't get in the way?
Thank you for your question, Representative Ross. I think there are a numerous list of them, and I would hope that the committee would indulge me that if I forget one, there are too many to count. I would say in healthcare, in the provision of medicine, I work a lot with our physician scientists at Washington University through the Cordell Institute, and they are concerned about having access to AI technologies to treat their patients, but also to be sure that the delivery of those treatments and the development of those treatments is done in a way which is consistent with the ethical and sustainably ethical practice of medicine. I mentioned in my opening remarks the problem we have in the courts of hallucinated citations, that states should be able to safeguard the integrity of their judicial systems and litigation processes by AI-specific laws, that general laws will not be enough in these cases, given the particular affordances and applications that AI produces. I think about education. I believe it was Mr. Kiley that spoke about that a moment ago. AI does have a potential to help people in education, but it also does tend to create massive plagiarism problems. So, and I'm being indicated to wrap up by the chair, so I will pause there.
Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Professor, you are knowledgeable, and we appreciate, and that's why I didn't stop it at the bell by any means. I wanted you to finish what you were working on. With that, we go to the gentleman from Wisconsin for 5 minutes.
Chairman. Mr. Thear, you've written previously about California taking a European-style approach to regulation. Chairman Jim Jordan of the full Judiciary Committee and Mr. Kiley and I were just in Europe last month talking with businesses, both European businesses and then American businesses with headquarters in Europe now within the EU, many of them in Dublin, actually. And what they told us was that this type of ex-ante regulation where anti-competitive practices are regulated before they exist, it typically undermines or overburdens companies before they can scale, and it kills kind of a lot of the small businesses before they're up and running. And it's exactly what Europe has it's why they have no gatekeepers. We're the gatekeepers. America innovates, China duplicates, and then the EU regulates. That's kind of where we're at right now on a grand scale. So if the US were to follow the EU's model of overregulating AI before it's understanding the risks, what impact would that have on AI development and competition? Because I believe that the EU is trying to create a space for themselves, just like they are with the 7 American corporations, for the most part created in California. There's one other one called ByteDance, you might have heard of it. But, you know, now we have the EU telling us with the DMA, the Digital Markets Act, how we can function and how we can, you know, advance ourselves as an American economy. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, you've got it exactly right, Congressman. Let's actually put some numbers on this. I often, when I'm lecturing to students, leading global digital technology innovators that are headquartered in the European Union today. And I'm usually met with silence. There are a couple, but actually 18 of the 25 largest digital technology companies in the world by market cap are American-based companies. Only 2 are European. Most people can't name them. When I ask that question, most people say companies that are now defunct, like Skype. and others. Innovation has died in the European Union. They've committed essentially continent-wide technological suicide with a regulatory model that is based on a sort of guilty until proven innocent mindset, where every single technology or innovation is somehow nefarious and must be bottled up and preemptively regulated. This is why, compared to the past, where the United States and Europe were very, very evenly situated in the early 90s, we went down two very different paths. And our path are more pro-innovation, pro-growth paths that really the Clinton-Gore administration unlocked with a Republican Congress in a bipartisan way. That yielded incredible benefits for our nation, which made us the global leader. The household names in digital technology in the European Union today are American companies. What is European Union exporting on the digital technology front? Red tape. That's about all I've got left.
Mr. Frasier, what would be some of the appropriate regulations that states could do a good job on? And then how would we fold that into kind of at the federal level, having some oversight? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Congressman. I think that dividing authority on the AI development versus AI use threshold is very important. If states want to regulate the use of AI, the application of AI in schools, for example, in healthcare situations, for example, those are instances in which states can truly run experiments because they are finite, they are within their own borders, and they're specific to their residents. But when we see states begin to enact proposals that are going to impact how AI models are trained and developed, that's necessarily going to bleed into other states, raising profound extraterritoriality concerns. So I think that a moratorium in Congress focusing on the difference between AI use and application versus AI development is a very helpful place to begin. What I would also encourage Congress to consider is the creation of a cause of action that allows non-state residents more means to contest the extraterritoriality of different state AI regulations, so that we're not just waiting for California to regulate and just hope no one challenges it, but empowering Americans to say AI is too essential to allow one big state to set the terms for the rest of us.
Thank you for that answer. Chairman, before I yield back, I just want to make the comment that, one of the concerns on many different fronts is how do you strike this balance between state development and economies and not seeing an overreach like we have seen here in D.C. many times. So with that, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. Gentleman yields back. We now go to yet another gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a recovering computer science major, and when I was studying computer science, I thought, oh, neural networks, they're never going to work. So just take whatever I say with a grain of salt. All right, I'd like to just note for the record what happened. Congress established in the House of Representatives a bipartisan AI task force. I was the co-chair, and there were 12 Democrats, 12 Republicans, and we all agreed on over 80 recommendations in a bipartisan manner, a number of which could be turned into legislation. And instead, the Trump administration basically says, no, we don't want Congress doing anything, and we'll go to the states and not have them do anything. We'll have zero regulation. And the Trump administration tried to put in a 10-year moratorium ban on states that was opposed by 17 Republican governors, 20 Republican attorney generals, and 130 Republican state lawmakers. And then that 10-year proposed ban failed 99-1 in the US Senate, a spectacular rejection of what the administration was trying to do. So now we're in a place where the actual reality is, it's not whether we're going to regulate AI. It's, do you want 17 states doing it, or do you want Congress to do it? And with that lead in, Mr. Thear, I know you were a supporter of the AI moratorium. Your approach failed. So now we're in this new sort of position since it's failed. I'm curious, what areas do you think Congress should regulate in? Because it's clear we're not going to preempt with nothing, sure. Right? What are the things that you think that would be helpful for the American innovation?
Sure. Well, first of all, Congressman, I want to thank you for your leadership on this with Representative Overnolte, with the House AI Task Force, and then also the legislation that you did mention that you sponsored on this. I think that was a good starting building block for what we can do. We've heard many other members here today talk about the sort of things that NIST could be doing, or the new CASI, which again is a carryover from the AI Safety Institute. We could take some of the ideas that are already been percolating at the state level, including in California and New York and others, to basically build upon what can be done in federal legislation. And you can combine that with other sort of targeted actions. I want to remind everyone here, people say Congress doesn't do anything. Does everybody already forgotten about the Take It Down Act? Passed overwhelmingly, right? We can take targeted approaches to this and we can take broad approaches. The point is that we can't have the technocratic design of regulation being done in a patchwork like this, or that is going to create serious problems for American innovators as we continue to try to race against China to build out our capacity. We have to balance safety and innovation at the same time, so we do need to have some preemption. In my testimony, I spelled it out in great detail how to do this, but reserve certain powers to the states. I want to agree with the Democratic Attorney General of Massachusetts who said, quote, existing state consumer protection, anti-discrimination, data security laws still apply to emerging technology, including AI systems, as they would in any other context. That's exactly right. States can continue to do that, but we need to have a federal framework to make sure we get this done right.
Thank you. Just as a side, I think there may have been some disparagement of California. I just want to note, Apple is headquartered in California, Google, Meta, Anthropic, NVIDIA. Turns out that California does pretty darn well with the laws that we have. Professor Richards, I have a question for you. California is now proposing SB 53. Have you looked at that in the California legislature at all?
Not at the level of detail that I want to answer questions under oath on it.
Okay, then that's fine. Now, you, in your testimony, thinks
The
there
gentleman,
should be...
before you came in, Mr. Frasier actually has studied it and is quite favorable in many areas of it. If you
Oh, so tell me about SB 53. What is your view of it?
Earlier in my remarks, I said that SB 53 is the least bad state bill I've seen with respect to AI development. I think that it gets right a lot of the emphasis on information sharing that we know is essential to leading to better AI policy. So the sorts of disclosures that SB 53 calls for from labs, I think, is a very positive step. I would like to see it done at a federal level and not at the state level. I also think that the whistleblower protections called for in SB 53 are important to, again, contribute more information sharing. But I will note that, for example, Senator Grassley has a whistleblower bill pending before Congress that I would prefer to be the vehicle for those sorts of protections.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So, Professor Richards, let me go back to you. So your view is there should be no preemption whatsoever. So let me just sort of ask you this question that you can answer because my time will be up soon. When a large language model comes out, it goes through this enormous amount of training and then post-training and all this, and you have a model. So let's say one state says, you know, we're going to mandate testing. Another state says we're not going to mandate testing. A third state says, not only going to mandate testing, we're going to mandate the 27 specific areas where you have to test. And then another state says, we're going to go even further than that and do, 35 specific areas and be very specific what you have to disclose, and on and on. How does, even technically, an AI company deal with that when they have one model? Do they just say, we're just not going to be able to allow this to happen, for example, in Missouri or California or Florida? Like, how does it even work if you have 17 states regulating one AI model? And I'll yield back and let him answer.
I was giving you all that extra time so you can let him answer, and if there's a follow-up within reason, we'll let you have it. It's the advantage of being nearly at the end.
There we go. Thank you.
Under that hypothetical, Congressman, I think it would be very challenging for a company to apply, but it is not my position that there should be no preemption, just that we should not consider broad preemption of state AI laws. Under appropriate circumstances, a sensible federal law would be naturally preemptive, and I would welcome a reasonable federal AI statute, just as I have welcomed and advocated for a reasonable federal privacy statute, which the United States is the only advanced economy that does not have one.
Great, thank you.
And we now go right to the gentleman from California. What does the hat say, Eric?
Jimmy Kimmel Live.
Of course. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'll get to AI in a moment, but I'm not going to miss the opportunity to ask my colleagues, the proponents of free speech across the aisle and the champions who sit with me, to condemn in the harshest terms what is happening right now from our administration. The second late-night comedian has been taken off the air because the president did not like a joke. I want to first condemn in the harshest tones the murder of Charlie Kirk. He should be with his family right now. He should be with his children. He should be alive. He had a right to say what he wanted to say to who he wanted to say without any physical violence being brought his way. And Jimmy Kimmel had a right to say what he said, which didn't in any way suggest that somebody in the MAGA world had been responsible for the murder of Charlie Kirk. He was just pointing out what folks online were doing as Twitter detectives before any investigation had been completed were saying about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And then he pointed out that Donald Trump, who did not go to Kirk's memorial service at the Kennedy Center over the weekend, when he was asked how he was feeling about the assassination, did not address it, but rather went right to a construction project. And for that, Jimmy Kimmel was taken off the air. That's not who we are. That's what it looks like in China. That's what it looks like in Russia. That can't be what it looks like in America. And the foundation of this, the genesis of this, was the president's FCC chairperson, Brandon Carr, sending a tweet that said, essentially, and giving an interview to a podcaster where he said, essentially, if ABC doesn't want to do this the easy way and suspend Jimmy Kimmel, we will do it the hard way, and it would be government censorship. Maybe I was not loud enough in the past when Republicans spoke out against government censorship. And if that's the case, I will go back and revisit whether I could have been louder. But that does not mean that today Republicans are silent just in an effort to own the libs. If you didn't like cancel culture when you thought it was happening in prior administrations, you certainly can't look at what just happened in our country and accept that that is something we should live with and we should tolerate. So I want to make it clear, there's going to be a Democratic majority in just over a year. And to the FCC chairperson and anyone involved in these dirty deals, get a lawyer and save your records, because you're going to be in this room and you're going to be answering questions about the deals that you struck and who benefited and what the cost was to the American people because that happened. I want to now move, Chairman, and I appreciate you holding this hearing, to AI and ask our witnesses first, and I'll start with Professor Richards. Professor Richards, what is the risk to the country if, particularly to children, if the government does absolutely zero on AI as far as legislation, as far as what they see, privacy that's taken, biases that are reinforced? What do you see the risk could be?
Thank you, Congressman. There are a number of risks. Some of them are known and some of them are unknown, which I think is why it's essential to preserve regulatory flexibility by the states as well as the federal government to deal with these questions. We've already discussed at some length, but perhaps we can't discuss it enough, the losses that the parents who are seated behind me have suffered. When we have in some cases, the reckless or the rash deployment of software agents in children's lives. There was discussions about telling them about Santa, but they've done much, much worse. That's one of the risks, exacerbating the mental health epidemic. There are risks to children in schools. Children don't read books anymore because of AI models. States should be able to address that pedagogically with particular consequences for our critical thinking skills that are necessary for our democracy.
Thank you. And also, Mr. Thear, I just want to, just coming from another meeting, I want to thank you for your remarks earlier about the FCC chair and his hypocrisy about censorship. With that, Chair, I'll yield back.
But the gentleman yield for
Yes.
a second. As often happens, there's a nuance of total agreement here, and I just want to speak well of your championing free speech. And perhaps those who leave broadcast, like our mutual friend Bill Maher, might find an even greater place, an even greater amount. I do agree with you that we need to continue to promote free speech, and your kind words related both in defense of one, but also on Charlie Kirk is very much appreciated. And I look forward to continue to work with you.
You and I have worked on a lot of issues, and I think this is one we can work on as well. Thank you, Chair.
Appreciate it. And that only leaves me. My job here is not just to ask questions, but perhaps to try to close on as positive a note as I can of what we seem to agree on. And I'm going to use a kind of a question-comment combination. I'd only ask that if I'm accurate, you agree that I'm somewhat accurate as briefly as possible. And I'll start primarily with Mr. Frasier, but I want to make sure I have total agreement. If Congress offers laws, and does it normally not, by definition, unless we expressly trample on common law remains a tool of the states. Is that correct, Mr. Frasier?
That is correct. Absent very clear language, yes.
Okay, so that's one of our challenges, to make sure that any preemption does not challenge existing laws. In the case of if you will, existing laws in states, for example, product liability laws. We've never preempted those, even though we do have some federal laws. The reality is an unsafe product, a product that injures people, have a myriad of state laws that already affect it. For example, when we went from a man striking someone to a man on a horse striking someone to a man in a car striking someone, we didn't necessarily have to make major changes in the law. They all fell, and none of them were federally preempted.
Correct, and there's a reason why law professors laugh at the idea of the law of the horse.
The law of the horse, exactly. So, Professor Richards, you gave us a great deal of caution. Is it fair to say that if we clearly carve around any question of common law preemption, and at the same time, do not stop causes of action which are, although perhaps automated by a bot and the like, still in fact follow that horse example, that in fact, for the most part, don't we meet the requirement of allowing the states to continue to protect their citizens as they have for 250 years?
I believe, Chair Issa, that states should have the ability to continue to experiment with their own laws in addition to the common law.
I fully agree with you, but and I'll go to Mr. Thear, because this is both law and policy. You mentioned a number of times ingestion versus output. Ingestion, which cannot easily be done 50 different states and 210 different countries around the world. Isn't that also a case in which the federal government must both lead on where the standards are, particularly as to patent, copyright, other intellectual property, and in order to have a single voice speaking around the world to other countries?
Yeah, that's right, Mr. Chairman. And let's be clear, we wouldn't be here suggesting that, we should have 50 FDAs for food and drug standards or 50 FAAs for different aviation standards by every state, such that planes had to change every state. That would be crazy, right? We don't want that model for AI either. We don't want this.
But a death by fentanyl, every state has a right to have charges in addition
on the use
to federal.
side, and let's just be clear, let's just check off the generally applicable laws that would be exempt from either moratorium or preemption. Civil rights law and discrimination, unfair and deceptive practices and anti-fraud, competition policy laws at the state level, other consumer
In
protections.
fact, the Lanham Act actually helps the states.
We can go on down this list, and then we can get into the lawsuits. The one thing America doesn't lack is an active trial bar. Right? There's going to be a lot of ongoing lawsuits, and we should throw the book at bad actors. There's always going to be bad actors regardless of technology. We have the capability to go after them.
Dr. Bray, I don't want to leave you out of this. Isn't one of the greatest cautions we heard today that we, in fact, have to make sure that when harm is done to anyone in a given state, that they have a reasonable cause of action? If it doesn't exist federally, it must be available to them in the states. Is that correct?
That is fully correct, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Fraser, I'm going to sort of guide this another way. From a standpoint of federal laws, it's fair to say that for all practical purposes, patent, trademark, copyright, these are bastions of federal law because under the recognition that they all travel interstate, they have to have one standard rules of the road, correct?
It was very apparent to the founders that they did not want a patchwork approach to copyright and patent law. Correct.
I think they also said that no state could erect basically a drawbridge and charge a toll to pass from one state to the other. They specifically understood that states might do that.
And it's a lesson we've learned throughout history with respect to, for example, attempts to change the length of a truck before it enters another state by Iowa was declared unconstitutional. We've been here before. We don't want a patchwork when it comes to national goods.
Okay, well, I'm not far exceed because I think we have the agreement that helps us in the guidelines. Certainly, in the case of one that was mentioned briefly, Padra, which does deal with deep fakes, with the digital likenesses and the like, and which we do have bipartisan support and we look to move. That was an element today, and I'd like any of you that want to comment further for the record to do so. I guess the last thing that we all have to do is recognize for the families that came here that we, from this chair, and I think you heard it from both sides of the aisle, we want to make sure that if we pass a law that further helps protect against the losses that you had, that it consider exactly what happened in the case of your families. And that if we pass a law, that in no way should it stop the causes of actions that may exist. If anything, we at a federal level, for example, a death by fentanyl, we want to hold those who knowingly deceive and sell pills purported to be some kind of a drug when in fact they are a deadly poison, that they be able to be charged with murder, as in some cases have been done at the state level. So I can assure you from this standpoint, and I think the ranking member would not nod in any way, but yes, that is a common goal and that we heard that message loud and clear. And I want to thank those who are here today for their presence. And I want to recognize Mr. Johnson for something he wants to place in the record.
Thank you. I have a couple of unanimous consent requests.
I know I'm going to like them.
I'd ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter by Alejandro Montoya Oya, the Vice President for the Center for Civil Rights and Technology at the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. A letter to you, Chairman Issa, and Ranking Member, myself, dated September 18, 2025, which expresses the conference's views regarding the potential preemption of states' efforts
without
to
objection,
implement
so
AI.
ordered.
And also to enter into the record a statement by Vered Horish, the Chief of Strategic AI Partnerships at Bray AI, titled "Don't Ban State AI Laws," as well as a letter from 17 Republican governors to Speaker Johnson and Majority Leader Thune, dated June 27, 2025, opposing the AI moratorium in the Big Ugly Bill.
Without objection, so ordered. And in closing, I too have unanimous consent. I ask unanimous consent that an extensive report and letter from the organization known as Engine, to both of us, which is a coalition of small startups, been around since I think 2011. Without objection will be ordered. An additional letter from the Americans for Prosperity, detailing the benefits versus the risk of 50 separate states. That'll be placed in the record without objection. A article from Politico dated, well, there we go, dated yesterday, and it's the California-Washington tech fight heats up. We placed in the record without objection. Additionally, a political article entitled, "We Don't Want California to Set the Rules for AI Across the Country," Trump advisor says. Will also, in spite of that, being placed in the record. And lastly, I want to thank our witnesses You've been informative, you've been helpful, and I think that this has, in fact, furthered our understanding of, quite frankly, what our need to act and our need to act with a restraint from some of the warnings that were given by Professor Richards. And with that, I have two more, and then we're done. Well, I'd ask unanimous consent that the President's AI initiative be placed in the record in its full. And additionally, the recent speech by Vice President Vance delivered in Europe be placed in the record. Without objection, those both will be ordered. Just to make it clear, additionally, there will be general leave for similar items not specifically spoken to by members on both sides of the aisle. They'll have 5 days in which to submit those. And as such, we stand adjourned.